This time, I'm going to ask for you to build some intervals. Some will be ascending and some will be descending. That way, we'll remember the procedures for both. Sometimes it's easy to confuse the two once you've been doing one or the other a lot. So, let's start out with an ascending major third. Hopefully you got an A sharp. Now let's try an ascending minor sixth. Hopefully you got a C flat. Let's try a descending perfect fifth from F. Hopefully you got a B flat. Now let's try a descending diminished second. Hopefully you got a B double sharp. That one was pretty tricky. Remember, in C sharp major, every note has a sharp on it. So if the inversion of a diminished second is an augmented seventh, the seventh note of the C sharp major scale would be B sharp, because remember all the notes have sharps. In order to augment that, we would make it a B double sharp. And we augmented it, why? Because we're making the inversion of a diminished second. The important thing to remember is inversions only come into play when you're building descending intervals. When you're building intervals above a note, you don't build an inversion. You just make the interval and stop. Let's try a couple more. Let's try an ascending major second. Hopefully you got a B. Let's try a descending major sixth below G. Hopefully you got a B flat for that one. Why? Because remember, the inversion of a sixth is a third. The inversion of major is minor. If we go 2 whole steps up from G, that would give us the third note of the G major scale, which would be a B natural. To make it minor, we lower it to a B flat. And then when we get our inversion, that makes a major sixth. Hopefully you got A as your answer. If you're still having a little trouble with this, I recommend that you practice some more. Perhaps you could go to eMusic Theory and do some interval drills there. But I do have a few more things to tell you about intervals. One other thing we should talk about is identifying intervals. This again is a place where sometimes students get a little confused, but that's mostly because they tend to make things more complicated than they actually are. So right now I've written some intervals on the board. What if I asked you to identify these? First of all, are these ascending intervals or are they descending intervals? The answer to that would be no. They're not ascending or descending intervals. They're just intervals. They just are, right? They're not going anywhere. So if I wanted to identify them, I would probably start from the bottom and figure out the distance from the bottom to the top, right? Because there's really no need to make the inversion to figure out what it is. That would be silly. That would be a waste of time. So right now, looking at this first one, I know I'm starting on a C. First I could figure out the generic interval by counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, it's some kind of a fifth. And then I can think of my C major scale, and I know that it doesn't have any sharps or flats. Therefore, this is a perfect fifth. Here, I have a B flat going to an F. I can count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, it's a fifth. Then I make my B flat major scale. Whole, whole, half, whole. Okay, it's a perfect fifth. Here, I have 1, 2, 3. It's a third. And then I think of the A major scale. It's a major third. This one, 1, 2, 3, 4. I think of the E flat major scale. It's a perfect fourth. So that's all you have to do to identify intervals. And you never need to label them like this, which I have seen students do, because it's not ascending or descending. It just is. It just is there as an interval standing there. The last thing you should know about intervals is that there are intervals that are larger than an octave. And these are what's known as compound intervals. So you can probably figure out what interval that is. This is a C, and this is a D. If this were a C, it would be an octave or an eighth. Since it's one more note, slightly farther away, this is actually a ninth. That's a tenth, and so on. So to figure out what a compound interval is, a really easy way to do it is just to move the note down, figure out what it would be if it was an octave closer, and then add the number 7 to it. Seems a little odd, perhaps, but not really. So this one here, it would be a third. 1, 2, 3. And because it's raised an octave, it's a tenth. What interval would that be? It would be a 12th, right? Because C up to G would be a fifth, plus 7 makes 12. And that's how you identify compound intervals. Sometimes we sort of just call them a fifth or a third, even though they really are an octave higher. But you should be aware that compound intervals exist.